Well, good morning, everybody. In today's forecast video, we're going to start and end with graphics that look just like this. We're going to pick up in North America with the high over low pattern, this cutoff low that's going to sneak through parts of the southern plains and high plains today, tomorrow, and then again at the start of the weekend. And then I'm going to finish with what's going on with the Brazilian monsoon and its weak pattern. So what are we watching here? Well, the flow continues to favor these deep troughs of low pressure over Alaska. And this one extends all the way into the Gulf of Alaska and North Pacific. And then it runs right over the top, just like this, leaving a cutoff low that's going to sit and spin here. Now remember, whenever you hear a meteorologist talk about a cutoff low, we're talking about a closed circulation that's out of the main body of flow of the jet stream. And the typical problem we have here is that it just stays. It doesn't go very fast. It has nothing to push it out of the way. So it's going to take a while for this to slide across parts of Texas. Now there's been some pretty significant changes overall in what happens to this low once it gets over parts of the southeast. And we're going to be talking about heavy rainfall and potential for a pretty sizable system rolling up the coast. But that's going to be the mainstay of the discussion for a while. I'm going to put it into context. I'm going to make sure I link this for you so you can play around with it. It's one of my favorite sites. It's a fantastic data set. It comes from Prism. That's the name of the organization that produces it, but it's out of Oregon State. And when you get here, you can play around with this website and all of its links and look at some great historical data, high-resolution historical data. But what I've done here is I went down to the 4-kilometer range. I picked precipitation, and then I went over to monthly and chose December just to make this map here. Because what I want to illustrate is that right now, for the month of December, it's pretty common for parts of Texas and New Mexico, the Panhandle of Oklahoma, Colorado, Kansas. This area, if you just match it up on the color bar, we just generally receive very small precipitation amounts, less than a half inch in some locations, to the wettest here being, approaching an inch. That would be normal December precipitation. So I point that out because right now the newest WPC forecast, is showing this area in through here. Remember that second contour represents an inch and a half. So its current model projections are at an inch and a half of precip, possible even greater than that as you get into parts of the Texas and Oklahoma Panhandle. And of course, some of this is going to be falling as snow. We'll talk about that in a few moments. What's changing is the potential for rainfall here in the models. I'm going to show you not only the GFS versus the European, but we're going to include a new AI model in the outlook today. Then we're going to get over to what's going on in the west and when we start to see the pickup in precipitation for California and the evolution of that extended Pacific jet system. And then notice around this is still quite dry. There's a little system to be paying attention to in the Midwest, but overall we're looking at a drier pattern. So this morning about 6 a.m. when I started recording, this is our all hazards weather map, some pretty thick fog, parts of the Pacific Northwest. We still have the freeze warnings that are out for parts of California, but this will be where we'll be watching a lot over the next 48 to 60 hours. And it is winter weather advisories, in this shade of blue. And then here you've got the winter storm warnings that have already been issued. Now, one of the big things I want to point out is we're going to talk a lot about the snow here, but I want to mention there's pretty heavy rain coming with it, and then possibility for some flooding in parts of Florida out of this next system here. So let's go to the snow side of it. This is this morning's ECMWF run, and I'm just going to play this forward to kind of get an idea through the next 120 hours or so. So that's 5 days on what the model's picking up for on snow. And you can see here that we still have some of this shading up here representing some places in New Mexico do have the potential for picking up over a foot of snow. And there's going to be some locally heavier amounts out of this big fat wet snowflakes, I think, in some places, that really might add up once you get out here into Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Southeast Colorado, picking up quite a bit, and most of New Mexico is going to be cold enough for this. On the GFS side of it, it's a little different scenario. So again, look how much more generous the model is. The European is with snow farther to the east and south, with the GFS kind of pulling much more of that back farther into New Mexico and parts of southern Colorado. So there are some differences. Now this is not to ignore what the models are suggesting here in the upper Midwest as well with the system, and you'll see them both timed out here in a few moments. But I want to get to the comparison on the wetter side of this, so the liquid side. As I play this forward, sorry it's a little choppy this morning. I've got good internet connection here at the Sheridan Sioux Falls, but it's not perfect. And when I get you out here, I just want to play it out a week. There you go. What we're watching is the evolution of this system once it gets over Florida and how it rolls up the East Coast. All right. So I'm just going to give you 4 maps of total accumulated precipitation. First here is the ECMWF 7-day totals. So again, just kind of line yourself with my color bar. I'm going to show you the color bar is going to be the same for the next two images. So here's one. You can see we also have some of the influence of a cutoff low trying to move onshore into Northern California. So that's trended much wetter here as well. But look at the difference between this and the GFS. If I play the GFS out there pretty quickly, sorry, it's a little jumpy this morning. There we go. Look at this. That is the European, and here's the GFS. Pretty substantial difference if you're anywhere along not just the East Coast, but clear to the Appalachian Mountains. I mean, substantially more precipitation. I'm going to explain to you why in just a few moments, but let's just do this. ECMWF versus the GFS. I think this map really makes the point. Remember, these colors represent where the GFS is wetter, and these represent where the European is wetter. So notice the European wetter on the backside when the storm system starts going here. The GFS substantially wetter in the interior parts of the East Coast as it pulls the wave much closer to the coast than the European does. So let's add the two new model forecasts. The first one I'm going to show you is the Fuxi machine learning model. And do you notice how wet it is also now in parts of like Alabama, getting over into maybe even pockets of Mississippi out of this as well. But what we're looking at here, if we bring up the color bar just to make a point, this is the 50 plus millimeter range. So this means, you know, we think of an inch as 25 millimeters. So we're seeing some really good, you know, moisture in this area through the next week. And then here's the GraphCast one. And it is also substantially wetter. So what this means is the operational European model, all right, the one we've tended to trust quite a bit for I have for a long time, seems to be the outlier. Notice how the two machine learning models plus the GFS are bringing much more moisture into this area. Now that is not to ignore the upper Midwest or what's coming into California. I've just been focusing on this area quite a bit as of late. So let's get in and have a look at it. We're going to start with the high-res NAM. Let me, in fact, try to do a refresh on this to see if I can speed it up a little bit. So this is the high-res NAM, picking this up through early this morning. We're going to watch by Wednesday, midday. This is where we're going to start to see some of that snow building in here, kind of on the northern side of this, widely spread rain throughout much of Texas, north to south here. As we just play it forward, we do have the risk later today getting into 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock tonight for ice showing up here on this side of it. So we could get some overrunning that builds into that temperature inversion that gives us the risk of ice. Going from this afternoon and this evening into the overnight hours tonight, playing into early Thursday morning now. We're now going to play through the middle of the day on Thursday and watch this system kind of slowly move its way east by the time we get into Thursday night. And then here we are moving out into Friday morning. So I told you it's going to be a very slow mover being cut off. So the upper level low basically moved from here to there in the span of about 55 hours. It's very slow moving. And then this starts to make its way east. Now you can see the upper level system that's coming in over the Midwest as well. So there's two waves here. You have your first wave that's doing this, that's going to end up down here, and there's a second wave. Remember we talked about yesterday coming in this direction. Now, I want to mention that there is going to be the risk of some stronger winds with this. Sorry, it's going to be a little jumpy. I apologize. And I want to get you out here and just give you a full 7-day forecast, because as this system rolls up the East Coast, it is really going to pack a punch. We could get some pretty strong winds over Florida. But you can see the strongest winds are offshore with this particular setup through the next 7 days. So here's what we're watching. By the time you get out there to this Sunday, here's the main difference. This is what the GFS has done. Much weaker wave comes in like this, but a much deeper wave staying farther to the north is why this thing produces a whole lot more precipitation along the Gulf Coast and in the southeast. The European model has a weaker wave farther to the south over Florida, and it's pushed the trough that sneaks through the Midwest farther to the east. So the net effect of that simple difference is to push the wave farther into the south. And I was watching this. In fact, let me do a refresh on this too, see if I can get a really good cut at it here. There we go. So what I'm going to be paying attention to is here we go through Thursday into Friday. We've seen this in the high-res NAM. Now watch. Because the GFS balls up a deeper low here and combines the two, the one in the upper Midwest and one that's coming out of the southwest, we get much more heavy precip to stay onshore. So look at that. So that wave just dives in, digs deep, pulls the other wave behind it, and it's just a great setup to be delivering heavy rain. Now, what's the difference? There's still a deeper wave here, not as deep as the GFS, but this gets out ahead of it. So it's not digging in to reinforce the flow coming around. Okay, that's what the GFS is doing. It's bringing the second wave in the backside, which helps to fling the front side around. Nope, they're not as well timed over here. Fling is actually a technical term, just in case you're wondering. And this is getting through Sunday. So look at where the heaviest rain is in the European, whereas the GFS is really pulling this into the southeast toward the Appalachian Mountains and then right through parts of the mid-Atlantic here. Now notice, in the west, we also have a difference. See the moisture that's coming in here with that cutoff low that's been sitting and spinning? Watch how quickly the GFS pulls this farther to the north while the European tosses it inland. But again, difference in the waves that are off the west coast as well. Now I'm going to take you back, though, just to show you the eastern United States as the system rolls through. We're just going to rock back and forth from Sunday morning through the day on Monday and into Tuesday. Much deeper low in the GFS because the waves combine versus the European, which kind of toss it farther off to the east. So significant differences overall in the pattern once we get out past the next couple of days. So this will be something to watch each morning in the new forecast videos, and then just paying attention throughout the day. Just go to agweather.com. You can look at all these maps. I have them all there, except for the Weather Bell ones on that site. And you can go to Weather Bell and get an account if you want. They're a great resource. So how about the snow side of it? This is the 3-day or 72-hour probability of getting at least 2 inches. So we're now, sorry about that. We're kind of honing in on who's got the bigger chances for snow. Here's 4 inches. There we are. And here is 8 inches. I'm not sure what's going on with this site. Let's try to reload this. That was a bit odd. There we go. So probability. Let's see if it does that again. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Wow. Been a rough morning. I didn't get into about 2 o'clock. Flight was a little late last night, and so not firing on all cylinders just yet. So here we go again. That's 4 inches, probability of 4 inches, and here's the probability of 8, and here's the probability of a foot. So we're kind of honing in on the heaviest snow. But let's come back to who's going to get some snow. Best chances at 2 inches. And remember, the European model brings more of that snow into this area, so we're going to have to watch the models carefully. And this is happening over the next 60 hours or so. So we'll pay close attention to that. I next want to take you to the probability maps on the heavy rainfall side of it. Now, interestingly enough, the European ensemble is picking up on the chances for that heavier rain up the east coast. It's still got this system farther to the east than the GFS does, but it is at least there. So this is the 10-day probability of an inch in the European model. Now let's do a couple other things here really quickly. You can see how wet we're expecting things to be in California with that cutoff low getting closer now in the forecast. Can I go to tell you what, let's go first to the drier side of this. So I'm going to come back to that precipitation tab. Where did I lose it? There it is. And I want to show you chance of less than a half inch. So we're still identifying those broad areas that are drier. Canadian Prairie, upper Midwest, parts of the Great Lakes, and then a huge section of the Northern Plains. That's our drier spot. Now, let's come back to this, flip it over to the GFS ensemble. There's the same map you just saw, but I want to now give you greater than an inch. So now these probabilities are higher in this area because of the way the GFS is handling this differently. Okay, after that, all eyes are going to go back to the Pacific to see if this jet extension continues to be a major player going forward. I'm just going to tell you, in the last 24 hours, some uncertainty is built in to kind of my forecast thinking as to what it's eventually going to do at Christmas. Remember, this is kind of a Christmas gift, okay? It's going to take a long time to extend like this. Again, this is 6,000 miles of jet extension. My problem remains that until then, the flow at the end of it splits. See that? And we want to know when and how this is going to force its way into the western mountains, what it does to California, how it then jumps over the mountains, and does it stay in the southern tier of the United States, or can we actually get a disruption farther to the north? Because what's plagued us all, this meteorological winter so far, is that coming out of the Canadian Prairie, we've just favored flow like this. And that's convergent. We need to get flow flipping around. Spent a lot of time telling you that. We got to get that turned around if we're going to start to really rebuild moisture back into some of these really dry areas. So I look out here at the week 2 forecasts, and the GFS and the European, which is the middle map here, they continue to show something happening across the southern tier of the U.S., right? Leaving the Northwest out. And I remember the Northwest is recovering from 7 to, in some places, almost 20 inches of rain, heavy snows in the Cascades. But this is the week 2 outlook, and it's wetter in California, wetter in the southern plains. But the CPC forecast was a bit more open with their moisture farther to the north, and I just don't think we fully know what that jet extension is going to do. I think the problem with this pattern, and I've stressed this a lot lately, is that when I look over the next several weeks, it's going to be shaking this upper level trough that's over Alaska. I think is going to be most critical. So this is a 7-day average height anomaly. We're going to look at it over the next few weeks. And what we're starting to see here is that through the end of this month, we're not getting rid of this. And as a result, what does it do? Flow comes around it, comes over the top, northwest through this area. Now, this could be better for the southwest, bringing in moisture. Absolutely. We love to see that. But as we just play this out there, when does that go away? We start to see some hints of it, maybe in the first week of January. And what we're getting here is more pushback to the Bering Sea, maybe even back toward Russia, some slight ridging coming in here. Now, I still have a sense of northwest flow, but the broader troughing that shows up in this area, well, that's one of the reasons why the more extended outlook for the United States on precipitation has flipped over to look something like this for the 30-day time period. Now watch, that's the next 30 days, but as I open this up farther into January, we start to see this pushing in. Now, can we get some cold air with it and start to build in some snow for the Midwest and the plains? That's yet to be seen. Or do we favor persistence and this doesn't happen at all and all the best flow stays south? That's going to be the trick with this upcoming forecast. And before I give you another hint as to what I'm concerned about over it, I want to come back to the temperatures. Because here's today's high temperatures on Wednesday going into Thursday. Look, beautiful example of a high over low. So there's the jet streaming over the top, the cutoff low spinning right here. Plenty of cold air under this for the risk of some snow, but very mild. I mean, it's actually going to be, 13 degrees warmer in Mitchell, South Dakota than it will be in Amarillo. What a cool way to look at that. So then we go into Friday, play this through the weekend into Saturday and Sunday. The low is just slowly moving over here. And then as it rolls up the East Coast later this weekend, we have plenty of mild air here, so I think this is going to be mostly a rainfall event for the East Coast. We do have some interior risk of some snow, but just backing this whole pattern up with more mild air just seems to be the way of it. I mean, if you look at the next 5 days from the GFS ensemble to day 5 through 10, and then day 10 through 15, so this is right around Christmas. We have just extremely mild air across North America, and we're waiting on several things to reposition themselves, like the extension of the Pacific jet, like the trough over Alaska, like the colder air that's moving off of Russia, and finally the MJO. I think we need to see one of those three things as the catalyst for change. Now, I'll be focusing most on Alaska, but I'm telling you, the stalling out of the MJO somewhere here in phase 7 and 6, not bumping way out into phase 8 and 1, is why we keep, I think part of the reason why we don't see the really healthy risk of some cold air in North America. It's just not there yet. Okay, let's switch to South America because this story continues to evolve as well. We did get some new data from the Standard Precipitation Index using the CHIRPS data set. So I'm going to show you the 1-month numbers here, and you can tell parts of Mato Grosso, Goiás, Tocantins, Minas Gerais, and up here into Bahia, We're looking at some very dry conditions over the last month while we're still seeing flooding in southern Brazil. This is hitting some very key acres in South America, as you know we've been talking about. But take a look at the 2-month. That's the 2-month drought severity index. Same regions, just worse. What I did was last night I ran on the new CPC data a map that looks at the last 60 days in terms of those ranks. And as you kind of focus in here, we can see a lot of 1s and 2s and 0s. If there's a 0, that means that it is the new kind of driest compared to data going back to 1979, kind of the new driest last 60 days. That makes sense. I'm comparing the last 60 days to history. And if I put a 0 on here, any single digit, that's how dry it is. Meanwhile, extremely wet down here. The Paraná River Basin, very wet. So this goes out right here through, it goes through Rosario and then out through like just north of Buenos Aires here. That's key as well. Okay, I told you I'd bookend today's report with these maps. This is what the monsoon looks like later today. You cannot have the monsoon coming in from this direction and expect to get rain out of it. It may eventually produce some decent precip here, but the right pull on this is coming way up here, down like that. And then fronts coming up from the south and all of it colliding in this area. So we don't have this. This is 850 millibar flow we've got flow coming from this direction. So that is out of the subtropics, not out of the tropics, and the result is the same. So the newest updates, the 15-day outlook from the European model looks almost exactly like it said yesterday. We have a pretty sizable area. I'd call that 95% of Brazil's growing area that's expecting drier than normal conditions, with the driest kind of epicenter being between Mato Grosso, Goiás, Tocantins, and Pará. Wet in Argentina. I mean, look how wet this is going to be down here. GFS is almost on board with the same thing, just trying to bring a little bit more moisture into Bahia with that flow coming in like that. But just that's still the same scenario. Now, are the models attempting to bring in heat? They are. I mean, this is the probability this weekend of getting over 90, and here's the chance of going in over 100. So we do have very hot temperatures coming into Mato Grosso do Sul, Goiás, Paraguay, just extreme heat coming back in, which is potentially detrimental to the crops grown in this area. But finally, we want to know, what about that same time period, that December 1 to 28? Have the models continued with a wetter or drier trend? And we stayed pretty similar to yesterday. Okay, remember, a few weeks ago this was expected to be super wet, and we just don't have it yet. But the models have not given up. They just kind of show that by January, moisture is going to be getting into this area. But I think if we finish December this dry, how can January rains recover what's potentially being lost right now? I don't know. I'm anxious to hear from some of my friends and colleagues in Brazil about how the next 10 days to 15 days goes and what that does to some of the crop. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. It still rains. There's still moisture in this, but given what is normal versus what we're forecasting, it is drastically reduced. I said we have to keep watching this carefully. So this is an important situation evolving in South America. All right, that's where I'm going to stop today. I appreciate your attention, and we will talk tomorrow morning. Thanks.